This YouTube video, Pontiac's and Atawang's Descendants, the Ottawa of Ohio, Walpole Island Canada, Kansas, and Oklahoma, was given at the conference titled The French of Colonial Detroit and Pontiac's War at the annual meeting of the Center for French Colonial Studies 2 through 4 October 2015 in Windsor, Ontario, Canada by the author. The reasons for Pontiac's war in 1763 against the British of Detroit and North America in general depends on which view one subscribes to. The Euro-American view of Pontiac's war suggests there was an Indian and French conspiracy to return French power to North America. The British threatened the stability and the security of the Native American world due to land-hungry speculators. A religious revitalization movement among Native peoples grew to reject white civilization and culture. The Delaware prophet Neolin was the leader of this movement. There was also the notion of manifest destiny, that is, the superiority of Euro-Americans sweeping aside inferior Native peoples, tantamount to racism. And lastly, some historians gave credence to the idea that Pontiac suffered insults by British officers that played a role in Pontiac's decision to destroy the British at Detroit and other British posts in North America. The Odawa view of Pontiac's war supports the idea that Pontiac suffered insults by the British. Benjamin Stickney, born 1773, died 1852, agent of Lewis Cass, interviewed Otusa, son of Pontiac, and his third wife, Kentucky Goon, the woman canoe paddler, about 1825, and prepared a manuscript on Pontiac and the Odawa Nation. The Stickney's heirs found the manuscript in 1852, sent it to Hezekiah L. Hosmer, editor of the Toledo Blade, who sent it to Francis Parkman, who published The Conspiracy of Pontiac in 1851, but was too late for the Parkman's biography of Pontiac's war. Howard Peckham, in Pontiac and the Indian Uprising, 1947, stated that Chief Tusaw, a descendant of Pontiac, was reported in 1825 to have dictated a biography of his forebear Pontiac. It was never printed and probably was never finished. The Stickney manuscript was found in the Massachusetts Historical Society by Ken Dixon of Toledo, Ohio in 1998 and published in Northwest Ohio History, Volume 71, Numbers 3 and 4, 1999, pages 62 to 80. A brother of Pontiac, Chenawabe, probably, had died. Pontiac visited Captain Donald Campbell or Major Henry Gladwin at Fort Detroit to ask for assistance to clothe his brother and perform such proper ceremonies for the interment of an important Native person. Campbell or Gladwin asked why Pontiac did not ask his French father for assistance. Pontiac was insulted, treated like a child, thought to be small and weak. He vowed to show the British just how weak he was. The distributions of Odawa peoples in North America follow this general timeline. 1. In the upper Great Lakes, notably Manitoulin Island, Mackinac Straits, and the French River, there was a loose confederation or association of Odawa, Ojibwa, also known as Chippewa, and Potawatomi peoples known as the Three Fires, which separated around the Christian era 1600. First contacted in 1615 by Samuel de Champlain, whom he called the Chevaux Relevés, or raised hares, near the mouth of the French River on the north shore of Georgian Bay in Canada. Father Ragueneau's Jesuit relation of 1648 and indicates there three Ottawa bands were recognized: the Sabo, meaning sand or otter, the Senago, meaning black squirrel, and the Kiskagon, meaning bear. The people of the Fork, noted during Jean Nicolet's visit to Lake Michigan in 1634, are the Nasaketan band, At the beginning of the 18th century, writers began to refer to the four bands as Odawa or Ottawa. 2. The Sable and Nosekhitan bands removed to Fort Pontchartrain, now Detroit, soon after its founding by Cadillac in 1701. The Ottawa tribe of Oklahoma referred to the Sabo band as Negeg, the Otter band, or clan. The French and Indian War from 1754 to 1760 between France and England resulted in Canada and Detroit being governed by the British. Pontiac's war against the British erupts in May 1763 and spreads east across the lower Great Lakes. 3. During the 1730s, peoples, or perhaps earlier, the Detroit Odawa used the Maumee River Valley as their winter hunting and trapping grounds. In October 1763, Pontiac, Atawang, and their followers fled to the Maumee River in the Ohio country and established two villages, one on Missionary Island, or Indian Island, and the other at Roche Debout, meaning rock on end. After the Revolutionary War, other Detroit Odawa relocated to the Maumee Valley in 1782 and remained until removal by the American government under President Andrew Jackson between 1832 and 1839. 4. Some fled to Walpole Island in Canada to escape American removal west in 1828 and the early 1830s. 5. Between 1839 and 1867, the Odawa at the Ottawa Baptist Mission on the Marais de Cygne River in Kansas Territory, ministered by Reverend Jotham Meeker and his wife. And finally, 6. Between 1868 to the present day, the Odawa moved to the Indian Nations in Oklahoma Territory because of the 1867 Omnibus Treaty that provided individual allotments of land to the Odawa. The Odawa were reconstituted and recognized in 1938 by the U.S. government as the Ottawa Tribe of Oklahoma. George Croghan, emissary of Sir William Johnson, British Superintendent of Indian Affairs of North America, visited Pontiac on the Miamis, or Maumee River, on August 28, 1765, to get him and his followers back to Detroit. Pontiac replied to Croghan, who stated, "Father, we have all smoked out of the pipe of peace. We are obliged to you for lighting up our old council fire for us, and desiring us to return to it. But we are now settled on the Miamis River, not far from hence. Whenever you want us, you will find us there ready to wait on you." The real reason Pontiac did not want to return to Detroit was the frequent and liberal use of liquor, particularly rum, which caused internal fights and deaths among his people, laziness, indolence, and the lack of the will to hunt and trap and acquire trade goods, ensuring economic survival of his people. On August 24, 1764, British General Bradstreet's expedition arrived at Cedar Point at the eastern end of Maumee Bay and encamped to wait for the chiefs of the Miami and some other Odawa chiefs that inhabited the Maumee River. Only a few Indians met Bradstreet at Cedar Point, but some Miamis who arrived there agreed to allow Captain Thomas Morris, born 1732, and died 1808, one of Bradstreet's officers, to go on a mission to the Illinois country by means of the Maumee River. With a French guide named Godefroy and a party of Indians, Morris traveled up the Maumee River to Fort Deschartres in the Illinois country, but he never made it, being returned by the Miami at Kekionga, making his mission a failure. On September 1, 1764, Morris relates that an Indian council of Pontiac's tribes near the Swifts, as he calls the Maumee Rapids, an Indian styled the Little Chief, presented me with a volume of Shakespeare, a singular gift from a savage. He, however, begged a little gunpowder in return, a commodity to him much more precious than diamonds. A week afterward, that book saved Morris's life. His escort of French and Indians, having landed from the Maumee, were assailed by a whole tribe who were lying in wait to kill the Englishman, and would have been overpowered had he been among them. But, he says, I had the good fortune to have stayed in the canoe, reading the tragedy of Antony and Cleopatra in the volume which Little Chief had given me, and had pushed the canoe over to the other side of the river. This was the first volume of Shakespeare in North America prior to the first American edition published in 1795. The 27th Indian Claims Commission, 187, decided the following in its findings of fact on March 28, 1972. The commission reported that the hunting territory in the region of Detroit was distributed about 1720 between the Ojibwa, who became known as the Chippewa of Saginaw Bay, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and the Wyandot or refugee Huron living in the vicinity of Detroit, but did not set rigid border lines. Pontiac, at the time of his death in 1769, had 3 sons and a daughter by his first wife. These were Shagenaba, Negig, born about 1749, died 1807, Mekessequa, born about 1759, date of death unknown, known as Half-Day Woman, and Otusa, born about 1756 and died about 1825, also known as Tusaw, by Pontiac's third wife, Kentucky Goon, the woman canoe paddler. Igushawa, born about 1760 and died 1796, was the son of Pontiac's daughter, Mekessequa. Atawang, an Ojibwa or Chippewa, was either a co-leader with Pontiac or a subordinate chief who fled from Detroit in October 1763 with Pontiac to the lower Maumee River in Ohio. He established a village on the north bank of the Maumee River at Roche des Bois. Pontiac established his village on the island now divided into 2, Indianola Island and Volmar's Island, next to Missionary Island. Atawang and his followers are the progenitors of the Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands of Odawa. Igushawa, born about 1726 and died 1796, spelled with many variations, was an Odawa war chief known as the Bear Chief. He was probably born in the Detroit River region, a son of a cousin to Pontiac and a brother of Notawants. Igushawa was Pontiac's successor after his death in 1769, who came to prominence during the American Revolution in the fight between Detroit's Governor Henry Hairbuyer Hamilton and American Colonel George Rogers Clark in the 1770s. He was Hamilton's right-hand native leader during the American Revolution. In 1780, Igushawa and his Odawas accompanied British Captain Henry Byrd's raid on Kentucky settlements that brought back many American frontier prisoners to Detroit. He organized Indian resistance to American armies of Generals Harmer, St. Clair, and Anthony Wayne in the 1790s, ending with the Battle of Fallen Timbers in August 1794. Igushawa was wounded at the Battle of Fort Recovery in June 1794 and shot in the eye with a musket ball at Fallen Timbers, but survived. Igushawa and General Anthony Wayne knew each other personally. Igushawa was one of the last native leaders to sign the Treaty of Greenville in August 1795, ending the war. Igushawa died at the Bay Settlement at the mouth of the Ottawa River in southeast Michigan in March 1796. Negig, the Little Otter, born about 1749 and died 1808, was the son of Pontiac and a brother to Shagenaba, Shamintawa, and Odawa chief at Sandusky. and Otusa or Tusa, probably born in the Detroit River region. Negig was a relative of Igushwa and co-war chief with him during the American Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783 and the Indian Wars of 1790 to 1794 against the American government. Negig led the attack on Fort Recovery in June of 1794 against Major General Anthony Wayne's American Legion. He was shot through the breast at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in August 1794. He was thought to be dead, but was picked up by several warriors and laid over his white horse given to him by Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe of Canada and rode off the battlefield. Negig attended the Greenville Treaty of 1795, but refused to sign the peace treaty. He was head chief of the Odawa of the Maumee River after the death of Igushwa in 1796. Negig resisted missionary David Bacon's efforts to convert his band to evangelical Christianity in 1804. He died at the mouth of the Maumee River about 1806 or 1807. Shabona or Chabonnet, born about 1775 and died 1859, was a grandnephew of Pontiac, born on the Maumee River in Indiana. His father was an Odawa who fought under Pontiac. He emigrated at an early age with some of his band to Michigan and became a lieutenant under Tecumseh in the War of 1812. Shabona moved to Illinois in the late 1820s to become chief of a Potawatomi band. He fought on the American side in the Sac and Fox War and the Black Hawk War of the 1830s. Shabona died July 17, 1859 at Morris, Illinois, and was buried in Evergreen Cemetery. This map shows Odawa reserves in Ohio from 1795 to 1833. From north to south are Royce areas 19, 182 and 183 were of the Maumee Band or Pontiac's descendants. Royce Area 18 was the U.S. military reservation, 12-mile square reserve, given by the Odawa to the U.S. at the Treaty of Greenville for military purposes. Royce Areas 169 and 170 are of the Roche Debout and Wolf Rapids bands, that is, Atawang's descendants. Royce Area 15 is the Odawa of the juncture of the Auglaize River and the Maumee River. Royce Area 168 is Aquanox's village on the Auglaize River. And Royce Area 167 was Upper and Lower Towatown of the Blanchard's Fork Band on the Auglaize River. Otusa, the youngest son of Pontiac, had 4 sons who came west with the Odawa from Ohio to Kansas Territory in 1832, 1837, and 1839. These were Natano, meaning the calm, born about 1781 and died 1846. Adaki, date of birth unknown, but died 1840. Wasayan, meaning far off, birth unknown, but died 1839. And Wasanaket, meaning a cloud far off, born about 1798 and died 1840. In 1816, the U.S. government, through the Office of Indian Affairs, estimated about 2,000 Odawa inhabited the Maumee River. The 3 muster rolls of Odawa removal to Kansas Territory between 1832 and 1839 show a total of only 354 men, women, and children. These were broken down as Aquanox's village of 72, 41 males and 31 females in 1832, 174, 95 males and 79 females in 1837, and 108, 55 males and 53 females in 1839. Natano was the principal chief of the Odawa at the time of his death in 1846. On January 5, 1830, John Holmes, known as Kanawaba, was the second chief of the Odawa who traveled with Reverend Cutting Marsh, Presbyterian minister, as interpreter to the Odawa camps on the Huron River in north-central Ohio. This was probably John Holmes I, associated with the Maumee River Band of Odawa at the mouth of the river. He was the son of Wasanaket, born about 1798 and died 1840, father of John Holmes II and grandfather of Joseph Holmes. He appears on the 1832 emigration roster to Kansas Territory. He was the principal chief of the Odawa from 1841 to 1861. Kanawaba, born about 1790, date of death unknown, son of Chenawaba, a brother of Pontiac, resided on Royce Area 183. He signed the Treaty of Fort Meigs in 1817 as a chief and emigrated in 1837 to Kansas Territory. Kanawaba was the grandnephew of Pontiac. He took the name of William Phelps and was the husband of Jane King Phelps. Jane King Phelps, born 1786 and died 1886, known as Chiqua, was sister of Lewis King. She was a medicine woman and a tribal historian. She was referred to as Aunt Jane, Queen of the Ottawa tribe of Oklahoma. Jane spoke French, English, and Algonquin languages. She lived in Ohio from 1812 to 1837, Kansas Territory in 1838 to 1867, and the Indian Nations of Oklahoma Territory from 1868 to 1886. Lewis King, born 1798 and died 1848, known as Pimatsawan, and Catherine King were the parents of Lewis King and Jane King Phelps. Lewis was of Canadian-French Chippewa heritage and an interpreter for the Odawa of the Maumee River. Catherine was Canadian-French. Joseph Badger King, born 1823 and died 1915, known as Kotawan, meaning backlog, was born on Maumee Island, probably Audubon Island now, near Toledo, Ohio. He emigrated to Kansas Territory in 1837. Joseph married Christiana McCoy of Muncie Odawa parentage in 1853 in Kansas Territory. She died in 1863. In 1872, Joseph married for a second time Delia Clark, his second wife, an Odawa in Miami, Oklahoma. She died in 1879. And in 1882, Joseph married for a third time to Annie Mitchell, a native of England. In all, Joseph had 13 children. He was chief of the Ottawa tribe of Oklahoma in 1883 due to impeachment of Chief John Early. The Wind and Jennison families are descendants of Kanawaba, son of Chenawaba, a brother of Pontiac. There were about 80 descendants of Pontiac by blood on the Ottawa tribal rolls in the 1960s, and 130 descendants of Pontiac through marriage by Jane King Phelps. The Ebenezer Presbyterian Mission was in existence on the Maumee River from 1822 to 1835, which attempted to civilize, educate, and convert the Odawa to Christianity. The mission was located on the south bank of the river near Tontogany Creek. Located in this area was the Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands of Odawa. Chief Tontogany, known as the Dog, had a village at the mouth of Tontogany Creek and the Maumee River. Nawash's village was on Indian Island in the river, and Kinjoino's village was on Royce Area 169, the 12-mile square reserve. The mission began by the Presbyterian Synod of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, was transferred to the United Foreign Missionary Society in 1825, and consolidated under the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions in 1826. The mission consisted of 5 buildings: a schoolhouse, quarters for the missionary family, a blacksmith shop, a horse stable, and a stove house. In 1826, there were 26 Indian scholars, 15 males and 11 females, of the Odawa, Ojibwa, Potawatomi, Wyandot, Miami, and Munsee nations. Crops grown were corn, wheat, potatoes, turnips, and oats. Domesticated animals raised were 150 to 200 swine, 28 sheep, 5 oxen, and 9 cows. Silkworm culture was also attempted. Rivalry between French Catholic Odawa and Ojibwa of the Maumee Band and the Presbyterian Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands continued in Kansas from 1839 to 1855. The Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands converted to being Baptists. David Green, born 1812, died 1845, known as Shongwesh, meaning mink or weasel, was the son of Natano, one of the principal chiefs, and a brother to James Wynn, known as Shobinda. He was baptized in 1838 in Ottawa, Kansas, and became Reverend Jotham Meeker's assistant as Baptist missionary in Kansas. David drowned swimming across a creek to attend a prayer meeting in 1845. Peter Menard, alias Parish Montour de Menard, also known as Sawandabons, meaning yellow hair, was the adopted son of the Odawa Tantagani, known as the Dog, a leader of the Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands. He was allotted 640 acres, and the Odawa Cemetery, known today as the Haberstock site, 33 LU 30, to care for at the 1817 treaty. The Catholic Church of St. Anne and the Corporation of the College at Detroit received several sections of land reserved at the 1807 Treaty of Detroit for use of the Odawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi, now released at the 1817 treaty. Wabadakaki, a leader of the Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands, was given 640 acres adjoining or below Peter Menard at the 1831 treaty. Makiona, known as Bearskin of the Roche des Bois and Wolf Rapids bands, was given 960 acres and a small island in the Maumee River for 3 years per the President of the United States. Otoki, a chief of the Maumee River Band, was given 320 acres for an indefinite period at the mouth of the Maumee River, including Presque Isle Village at the 1833 treaty. The Navarre brothers, living with the Maumee River Band on Royce Area 183, were allotted 800 acres for an indefinite period at the 1833 treaty. Petaw, an Odawa woman of the Maumee River Band, received 80 acres at Presque Isle, including her cabin and field for an indefinite period. She sold the allotment on February 23, 1836 to Marquis Baldwin and went to Kansas Territory. In this slide, you see the 1837 and 1839 Odawa muster rolls from the Michigan Superintendency of the Office of Indian Affairs in the National Archives, Washington, D.C. The Maumee Band of Odawa had some members refuse to emigrate to Kansas Territory in 1837 and 1839. They traveled east along the Lake Erie shore and exploited the area where Bono, Ohio now stands. The area was swamp and marsh. Victoria Carteret, born about 1828 and died 1915, also spelled cataract and Cadorac. On November 5, 1868, Arnold Mayhem of the U.S. Post Office in East Toledo wrote to Secretary of the Interior in Washington City. He stated, "A few Indians of the Ottawa tribe near Lake Erie who declined to remove west of the Mississippi River have no ground to sit on and are driven from one place to another as new settlers occupy the land. They never received any monetary compensation from the U.S. government for their interest in the country. Maham asked, do they have any rights or benefits under the removal treaty? There are 2 or 3 Indians, old, infirmed, and helpless. They will not survive the coming winter unless provided for. The federal U.S. Census for 1880 shows Victoria Carteret, again born about 1828, died 1915, reported to be a full-blooded Ojibwa or Chippewa, was born in Ohio, as were her parents. She had 2 children. Her children were Peter, born 1864 and died after 1886, and Catherine, who died or was born 1866 and date of death unknown. Joseph Fisher was Victoria's great-great-grandson through her daughter Catherine. Victoria's occupation was listed as a basket maker. She also supported herself by growing corn, potatoes, and beans in a garden during the summer months. Past the age of 80, she lost sight in one of her eyes. In an interview with a Toledo Blade reporter in 1900, she stated her grandfather was an Indian chief who owned much property about and below Presqu'île in Oregon, Ohio. Her husband was half French, but she was a widow for most of her life. Her father died young, and her mother remarried Francis Navarre, the eldest brother of Peter Navarre, the famous War of 1812 scout. She was a cousin of the Nags family that went to Walpole Island in Canada in the 1830s. By 1880, Victoria was living near Curtis in Ottawa County, Ohio. She died on March 23rd, 1915, of pneumonia after having spent 13 days in the hospital from a broken femur in the infirmary at Oak Harbor, Ohio. She was buried in an unmarked grave in Crane Creek Cemetery in Allen Township, Ohio. The Francis Bono, also known as Bunno, born about 1828 and died 1901, family from 1844 to 1893 in Jerusalem Township, Ohio, contained dense forests and swamps that covered the land with little development until 1870. Evidence of Odawa Indian burial grounds have been found in the area. A group of mixed Odawa and Ojibwa from Royce Area 183 moved 15 miles east to Jerusalem Township area, out of the way of Euro-American settlement. These Odawa and Ojibwa engaged mainly in fishing, hunting, and trapping. Because the narrow roads were nearly impossible due to mud, these people often traveled by boat along the lakeshore to Toledo with their furs. There was an Odawa village about a mile east of present-day Bono, Ohio, where Francis Bono had his wigwam. Francis Bono's father was said to have been an Odawa chief who refused to remove west to Kansas Territory in the 1830s or moved to Walpole Island in Canada and remained in Ottawa County, Ohio area. The 1850 federal census for Carroll Township, Ottawa County, Ohio shows Peter Carteret, 45 years old, a farmer born in Michigan, had 3 daughters and 1 son. Angeline, 5 years old, was born in Ohio. Toussaint Carteret, son, enlisted on December 21st, 1863 at the age of 25 as a private for a period of 3 years in Company H, 100th Regiment of the Ohio Volunteer Infantry. He died on April 4th, 1864 at Knoxville, Tennessee during the Civil War. In 1861, Francis Bunno, also known as Shua, married Mary Angeline Carteret, known as Shabek, born about 1845 and died in 1909. The daughter of Peter Carteret and granddaughter of Victoria Carteret, and had 6 children together. The children were Sophia, born 1862, died 1925, Louis, born 1866, died 1949. Catherine, born 1867, died 1950. John, born 1868, died 1907. Frank Jr., born 1870, died 1923. And Noah, born 1871, and death unknown. In 1898, the village known previously as New Jerusalem and Shepherdsville was renamed Bono, Ohio, after Francis Bono when a U.S. post office was established. Francis Bono died April 4, 1901 of pneumonia and was buried in Glode Kutcher's Lot in Elliston Cemetery in Elmore, Ohio. In a memorial of the Chippewa, Potawatomi, and Odawa Indians claimed to the Huron Reserve, Fighting, Turkey, Bois Blanc, and Point au Pili Islands to the Governor-General of Canada in 1869 tells the story of some Maumee River Odawa who migrated to Canada in the late 1820s and early 1830s. In 1829, Chief Wawasam, with other Indians belonging to Walpole Island, but who at the time were living on the Maumee River in Ohio, with Chief Wasanakot, delivered Fighting Island in the Detroit River to Thomas Paxton for a lease of 999 years. Osignac, an Odawa of Larber Croche in Michigan, told Henry Rowe Schoolcraft at his house in 1834 that some Odawa of the Maumee River requested to join their brothers in northern Michigan, but were told it was better for them to remain where they were. An 1867 affidavit of Oshawahu stated the Odawa chiefs Atawang and Kewishawan died at or near what is now Sandusky, Ohio, and Udasham, also known as Ogushawa, at Miami's, that is the Maumee River, gave a large string of wampum to the Wyandot to keep an Indian fire on the hunting ground, referring to Fort Malden, Canada. Another 1867 affidavit by Kiosk stated that Odawa chiefs Wanishki and Onagon died in the vicinity of Sandusky, Ohio. Igushwe on Walpole Island, Magishaway at Miami's or Maumee River allowed the Wyandot to live on a part of the Malden hunting grounds. The 1867 affidavit of Thomas Buckwheat, born 1813, died 1867, and Ojibwa or Chippewa stated to his knowledge that Chief Wawasam and Wawishki, the dependent's brother, with other Indians belonging to the Indians of Walpole Island, but who at the time were living in Miami's, that is the Maumee River of Ohio, with Chief Wasanakot, delivered to Thomas Paxton about 80 years ago a long lease of Fighting Island. In 1829, some Odawa leaders requested permission from the British government in Canada to settle on Walpole Island rather than be removed to Kansas Territory. About 1832, the late chiefs Shah Yukima and Kwakwakgabu Natawants, son of Makutejiiko, and others send an invitation to Maumee River Odawa in the state of Ohio to come to Canada. The invitation was accepted and they were adopted into the Walpole Island Band. Walpole Island Declaration by Peter Wigishik, 1875, and Pelogisic, 1877. Between 1915 and 1925, deaths of Odawa Indians on Walpole Island who had a Maumee River connection were Lizzie Navarre's baby, died January 18, 1915. George Naggs Jr. died April 2, 1916. George Naggs Sr. died June 8, 1916. Lizzie Navarre, daughter of Fred Navarre, died March 25, 1919. Another baby of Lizzie Navarre died on March 27, 1919. And Mrs. Henry Naggs died October 22, 1925. In 1985, some Odawa of Walpole Island came to Toledo, Ohio to visit their ancestral home, and a lengthy magazine article with photographs was done by the Toledo Blade newspaper. Lionel Sands, Bill Colwell, Simon Blackbird, Eliza John, and Silas Thomas of Walpole Island all had ancestors that came from the Maumee Valley of Ohio. By 1900, all the Indian nations had been relocated to Oklahoma except the Munsee and Chippewa. The separate bands of Odawa in Kansas, that is the Roche de Bois and Wolf Rapids, and the Blanchard's Fork bands, became confederated into one entity or tribe in U.S. treaties after their removal from Ohio to Kansas Territory. In 1862, the tribe was known as the Odawa of Blanchard's Fork and Roche de Bois. They received a 74,000 square acre tract near Odawa, Kansas. The Odawa Baptist Mission was founded on July 18, 1837, when Reverend Jotham Meeker, born 1805 and died 1855, born in Hamilton County, Ohio, and his family unloaded their wagons on the north bank of the Marais de Cygne River, that is the River of Swans, near Odawa, Kansas, founded in 1834. Construction of a small schoolhouse was completed on July 9, 1838, and Odawa leadership insisted instruction be conducted in English. Of the 26 Odawa who were persuaded to attend school and occasional religious services in 1838, Meeker was able to convert only Shongesh, or the Weasel, later named David Green, son of Notno and a brother to Shalbinda named James Wind, a minor tribal leader. Almost immediately, Shongesh was designated principal chief of the Odawa Nation by Meeker, placed on the government payroll with the title of Native Assistant, and given responsibility of attempting to convert his wife and parents. Between 1839 and 1840, there was much drinking, fighting among the Odawa over Catholicism versus Protestantism, and a temporary reversion to native conjurers and dancing. Waysayan died of sickness on December 31, 1839. The half-brother Wasanaket died of sickness on January 10, 1840. And Otaki, the third half-brother to Waysayan and Wasanaket, was greatly distressed on March 13, 1840 by Meeker's conversion of Shongesh, or David Green, and his wife. Aged and extremely sick, the traditionalist called a general council of the tribe, at which time he severely denounced Meeker and his efforts to destroy tribal unity. Speaking through Kamchaw, known as William Clark, because of his own illness, Otaki accused the Baptist missionary of doing great mischief by separating families and friends and making confusion all over the nation. Otaki died 5 days later on March 18, 1840. The last major obstacles to Meeker's religious work were ended with the deaths of Wasanaket and Otaki. Meeker reported the Odawa population had increased on September 12, 1851. There were 3 times as many births as deaths. Reverend Jotham Meeker died on January 12, 1855, and was buried in the Odawa Cemetery at the Mission. A year later, his wife Eleanor D. Richardson Meeker died and was buried next to him. In this slide, you have the gravestone of Lewis King, born 1798, died 1849, known as Pimatsawan, who died on or about November 11th of that year, as Reverend Meeker cut letters in his gravestone on this date from an entry in his journal. You have B, the gravestone of Notno, born about 1781, died 1846, and buried in the Odawa Cemetery at the Baptist Mission in Odawa, Kansas. C is Chief John Wilson, born 1813, died 1870, known as Partee or Pati, died on the journey to Oklahoma at the Osage Mission. This photo was taken in 1869. Jane King Phelps, born 1766, died 1886, was visited by Meeker, who remarked in his journal that she was dying. Meeker attended a Catholic Mass for her at her cabin in June 1839, but she recovered. And in D, you have Joseph Badger King, born 1823, died 1915, known as Atawang, meaning backlog. He attended school for several years at a Quaker mission in what is now Johnson County, Kansas. A year or two after the death of his father, with his sister Lucia and his cousin Angeline Bureau, he was taken by Thomas Wells, an English Quaker superintendent of the mission, to Waynesville, Ohio, about 25 miles from Cincinnati, where they were all placed in Quaker families to learn to work and to go to school. Upon his return to the Odawa in Kansas, he experienced such a dislike for Indian ways that he soon went back to Ohio. He only stayed there 1 year, however, and then returned to the Odawa. In 1853, at the age of 30, he married Christiana McCoy, who was of Munsee and Odawa parentage, and who, with her brother Isaac, had adopted the name of McCoy out of respect to Isaac McCoy, the noted Baptist missionary and pioneer. This photo was probably taken in 1869. And in E, you have the gravestone of Chief Compchaw, born 1789, died 1863, who died in March of that year at age 74. And F, you have a photo of James Wynn, known as Shapanda or Shabonda, meaning passing through. The Ottawa Treaty of 1862 provided that a 20,000-acre parcel of tribal land be used for a school for the benefit of the Ottawa Indians. The Ottawa University back then is a case study of manipulation and fraud, whereby the Ottawa were promised a university, paid for most of it, and then lost it in the offices of bureaucrats. Today, the Ottawa University is a private, nonprofit, faith-based liberal arts college located in Ottawa, Kansas, of the United States. It was founded in 1865 and is affiliated with the American Baptist Churches, USA. In this slide, you have a photo of Joseph Badger King at age 90, nephew of Jane King Phelps. He was acting chief of the Odawa tribe of Oklahoma in 1883 due to impeachment of Chief John Early of the Odawa tribe of Oklahoma in 1881 and 1882. And in B and C, you have the Odawa visiting their queen, Jane King Phelps, on her 115th birthday in Ottawa, Kansas. She was photographed by T.M. Concannon on January 6, 1882, courtesy of the Denver Public Library in Denver, Colorado. The Treaty of June 24, 1862, between the United States and the Odawa of Blanchard's Fork and Roche des Bois, established that Odawa tribal relations were to be dissolved within 5 years, and the Odawa would become citizens of the United States. Allotments were made in severalty to members of the tribe. 20,000 acres of land were sold for the benefit of the school fund, that is the Ottawa University. Lands were also granted to Baptist Church and sundry individuals. The remainder of the reserve was to be sold for the benefit of the tribe by the United States. The Treaty of February 23, 1867, between the United States and the Odawa of Blanchard's Fork and Roche des Bois, removed the Odawa of Kansas, as well as other tribes in Kansas, to Oklahoma Indian Territory. On July 25, 1867, Odawa lands became alienable, and they sold their individual allotments. In 1868 and 1869, the Odawa were moved to the Oklahoma Indian Territory located adjoining the Peoria Confederacy. The Odawa of Oklahoma were reconstituted on November 30th, 1938 by the U.S. federal government as the Odawa Tribe of Oklahoma, pursuant to the Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act of June 26, 1936. The Act of August 3, 1956, Public Law 84-943, terminated federal supervision over the property and members of the Odawa Tribe of Oklahoma. This act was repealed by the Act of May 15, 1978, which restored the Odawa as a federally recognized tribe of the United States. In 1986, there were about 2,000 Odawa members, of which 377 were residents of Miami, Oklahoma. 40.28 acres of land was owned by or for the tribal headquarters, which also included a cemetery and the powwow grounds. Today, they have the High Winds Casino in Miami, Oklahoma. In this photo, you have the Odawa Cemetery 5 miles east of Miami, Oklahoma, in existence from 1870 to the present day. There are 12 Odawa chiefs and 1 Peoria chief buried in the cemetery. Some 1,365 Odawa are buried in the cemetery. And in B is Lizzie Lavore Wolf King, a descendant of the Wolf Rapids Band of Odawa of the Maumee River in Ohio. She was grandmother of Chief Charles E. King Sr. And in C, you have Jane King Phelps' gravestone in the Odawa Cemetery at Miami, Oklahoma. And in D, you have William Clark's gravestone, who was a descendant of Comchaw of Oquanaxa's village on the Auglaize River in Ohio. And in E is a group of the first Odawa in Oklahoma Indian Territory. F is the Odawa Powwow Grounds in August 1996 in Miami, Oklahoma. The tribal cemetery is in the background to the left. And G is a gravestone of Clarence E. King Sr., born 1907, died 1972, known as Washageeks, meaning first sign of light in morning, who was chief of the Oklahoma Odawa from 1959 to 1972. He was a descendant of Chief Oquanaxa, whose village was on the Auglaize River in Ohio. In slides 27 and 28 are selected references used for this YouTube video.